Hi everyone, this is Pam. I'm Head of Expedition Operations at Noble Caledonia, and we have with us again Dr. Olav. We did such a lovely interview before on the icebergs of Antarctica, and this time we decided to talk a little bit about the ice, glaciers and icebergs that are in the Northern Hemisphere and the North Atlantic in particular, which is the area that many of our clients are from and we do a lot of our travels in. So you may recall from last time, Dr. Olav was at the University of Bergen for a long time up in Norway, then the Norwegian Polar Institute, and also at the Norway Research Council, until he's now floating around in a retirement stage and helping people like us with interesting web content. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. So last time we spoke about the Antarctic Peninsula and the icebergs down there, which are legendary, amazing, a super exciting part of the journey. And in the North Atlantic, of course, there's so many less icebergs. It's not something that you expect to come across too often. Although there was one voyage in the island sky, so I guess we'll remember, where we had this big storm coming down from Greenland, and we were actually seeing icebergs off Iceland that had popped out from Greenland. So that was quite a rarity and exciting for us. But tell us a bit about the few icebergs that you can find in the North Atlantic.
Well, first of all, the icebergs in the Antarctic are much larger than the ones you see in the Arctic. And if you've seen icebergs from Greenland, you will see they're still huge, but there are nothing like the tabular icebergs we have in the south. Most people know that the Titanic, of course, was hit by an iceberg, or it hit an iceberg. That iceberg didn't need to be very big for it to destroy a ship like the Titanic, going at full speed, hitting a small piece of ice. It's more than enough to make a hole in the bow of that one. Those icebergs came from Greenland. They actually break off from the west coast of Greenland, and then they float around in the sea, and then eventually come out at Newfoundland. And we can't, of course, tell exactly where that one ice came from, but most likely it came from the Greenland. Sometimes you see icebergs off Iceland that have come from Iceland. These are also very small, even smaller than the Greenland ones. And apart from that, in the North Atlantic, we don't see any icebergs. The icebergs that break off, say, from Spitsbergen or from Norway, in the northern part of Norway, they're tiny little icebergs, and they melt quite quickly in the warm water. You'd be very unlikely to see them.
Yes, the North Atlantic drift is what keeps the water quite warm up there, and obviously quite balmy and pleasant in Europe and the UK. So yes. That's right. I mean, we've almost never come across icebergs, as you say, apart from just on that west side of Greenland. But that one time in Iceland, and the sea was really quite rough because of the storm, and it had obviously brought these icebergs down from, I would say, Scoresbysund, down to the north coast of Iceland where we were. It was such a surprise. We made an announcement over the PA. We were like, everyone, look outside now. Like, this is not something you expect to see here. So that was quite exciting. So, as you say, a lot less icebergs.
Just to say, the icebergs that you saw coming from Scoresby Sound and come down towards Iceland, they normally drift around Greenland, and then they go up the west coast. They don't go south because the currents there go actually around the whole big island.
Interesting. Yeah, they swap.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, much less icebergs in the northern Atlantic area, but we do have a lot of really interesting glaciers, ice caps. Obviously, Vatnajökull in Iceland, and from where you are in Norway, there's a lot of ice glaciers that we visit. We do one trip when we do Iceland, we try to get up on the ice cap on a tour with the snowmobiles and everything. It's really quite fun. And then we do the glacial lagoon in Iceland as well. But over on the Norway side, two of the ones that we visit every year is Svartisen, which is a really lovely stop for waffles, if not to see just the glacier itself. And then Briksdal is a lovely hike up to that glacier, but very much noticeable, even to the guests. The signs are there. This receding, this idea of retreating. Tell us a bit about the Norwegian situation and or Iceland as well.
Well, both of them are actually quite similar, but Norway, of course, I know best. I actually grew up, my uncle and aunt ran a big tourist hotel just under the foot of a glacier, which is a very sister glacier to the Briksdal. And so in my summer vacation, I would be spending time there. And when I was 17, I started as a glacier guide. And that's how I got involved with glaciology and later studied this. And we were crossed from where I lived and across to the Briksdal Glacier. And all the glaciers in this part of Norway, and in fact, all the glaciers in Norway have been receding since I did my PhD on one of these. And the recession has been dramatic. And the most dramatic of them, perhaps of them, is the Briksdal itself. But there are many of these which are all branches of the ice field called the Jostedals Glacier. And all of these branches are retreating. And most of them that were accessible for people to walk in the valley bottom, you can no longer get to very easily. And in many ways, the tourist attraction is going away for many of these. Not all, but they are changing. And of course, it's a phenomenon from global warming. The precipitation in the winter, the snowfall is about the same, but the temperature has gone up. And so there's more melting, and therefore they are retreating.
Yes. So, you know, year on year, going to Briksdal, you can see that little chunk of snow that's left is less and less and less, until it's just like one little sort of fraught patch of snow peeking out of the edge of the top of a waterfall there. And otherwise, people often ask me, because we go to the polar regions a lot, Svalbard every year or Antarctic every year, and they ask me, you know, have you noticed it? And although in my scale, just the little 10 years of going there, you know, you notice a few little signs, but that's not really climate change in 10 years. But what you do notice is when we go up fjords, particularly in Svalbard, the ship starts to travel in deep water in the fjords on what the chart shows as was glacier. So it now looks like the ship is traveling up on the glacier, because it wasn't charted, because it was all, you know, glacier for so long, and now we're traveling kilometers further. So it's not something I've seen in my 10 years or so at sea, but it's something you can pick up on the chart and you think, this is quite incredible. New islands appearing up in these fjords. So it is very obvious, even if you're a first time traveler to these areas, you can see where it used to be before, just by the, you know, the fact that there's no vegetation there and it's been freshly exposed. And it is something that everyone's quite able to see, I would say, at the moment.
Yes, Svalbard, of course, the Spitsbergen is spectacular in that sense, that there are many glaciers that have retreated so that the whole landscape has changed. What used to be thought was part of the land of the main island, suddenly it turns out to be small islands, and you have water between, which used to be covered by glacier, and we thought there was land underneath the glacier, but now it's the ocean. And as you say, especially in the Ålesund, when you go in the fjord there in what's called the Kings Bay or Kongsfjorden, then you can go far into the fjord to where there used to be glacier. And that's probably, by all accounts, depends, of course, how we humans behave into the future, but by all accounts, this is going to continue for all foreseeable future. The glaciers will retreat.
And Olav, what is your latest information on how this transpires into sea level rise? I know that was quite topical, maybe I would say a decade or so ago. And where's the science at now in terms of sea level rise, and particularly, say, from what's happening in the Northern Hemisphere?
Well, if you look at sea level rise, this, of course, is not affected by things that float in the ocean. Icebergs and floating glaciers don't affect the sea level itself, but everything that's of the land ice that comes into the water adds mass to the ocean, and so the ocean will rise. And that is the fastest phenomenon now of the sea level rise, is related to the change in amount of ice on the land surface. Both the small glaciers in the northern and southern hemisphere, in Greenland, and now also Antarctica, is adding mass to the ocean. And the rate of increase of sea level has accelerated very significantly. When I started my studies, it used to be 1 millimeter a year, which is not all that much. And now it is about 4 millimeters a year, which is about this much. And that's every year. and it's been going up like that. So there's a curve where this has been increasing.
Yeah.
And the largest uncertainty still is the Antarctic ice sheet, because there's so many parts of that that we don't measure at all. But by satellite technology, we can now see that both the Antarctic and, of course, we can see it very well for Greenland, is now been going down in mass. And so sea level rise is, I would say, the changes that in prediction from the first IPCC report, the International Climate Change Panel, until today has also been dramatic. They used to say that there would only be a few tenths of centimeters. Now, the IPCC predicts about a meter sea level rise by the end of the century. And most glaciologists, including myself, think it's going to be closer to 2 meters by the end of this century, which definitely will affect people who are living close to the water edge everywhere in the earth, on Earth.
Yeah, and the low-lying area is quite far inland. Yeah, certainly I'm on a coastal town, and I often think how long some of the real beachfront places will be until they're uninsurable, just because of those, storms and things, and the sea levels rising and increased prevalence of big storm surf. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting time to be an observer in all of this. Now, actually, the reason Olav and I met is because we both work on the climate change working group for the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators. So I represent Noble there, and Olav is also on the working group. So he's obviously the brains behind the whole operation. But one of the things we're really working on is an industry-wide emissions reductions to-do list and setting of targets. That then follows into offsetting as well. But what's going on at the moment is a big scramble worldwide amongst the shipping fleets to look at these lists and what are the clever ways in which emissions reductions can be achieved. And I would say, Olav, would you agree, as any individual or company or wherever you have influence, the biggest thing you can do to help is cut down your emissions as much as possible. And you need to be looking at targets of 20 to 50% as an individual if you can. And those are where people like us living lives like we do need to be looking towards.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think it's a big challenge. And some types of industry, like of course the shipping industry, it is not easy to reduce the main part of the emission, which is related to the like moving from point A to point B. And especially if you go to places like Antarctica, where there's no source of electricity or power made from wind or from solar cells or any other renewable, this is, of course, cannot be reduced down to zero. It's interesting, in Norway now, we are getting restrictions on ships that are traveling locally. Ferries crossing the fjord, for example, have to be battery powered, because you can then charge up your batteries each time you go to the other side. But we can't do that in the Antarctic at the moment, nor in Greenland, etc. That's the reality. And yet, once we start thinking about how to reduce, then there are places we can use, and there are ways we can handle this also with choice of speed, how you go from one side to another, etc., etc. So the whole industry, as you say, is becoming concerned, and we are discovering ways to save. And I'm quite sure we will also see innovative solutions that we don't even see yet, but it's going to be interesting to see where the industry goes in the future. And maybe long time ahead, we will see battery sources in the polar regions, where you can charge up your batteries from wind power or whatever. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Norway and Norwegian ferries and vessels are really leading the way in the transformation of vessels, and also the government imposing requirements on vessels to be greener. So it's a really great, it's not a surprise that, this is all happening in Europe. But as you say, it's going to take a lot longer for this to filter out into some of the more remote and expedition places. And as Olav alluded to, a lot without these amazing pie in the sky inventions that are already underway, and some of them are already available. A lot of amazing things are coming about in terms of technology, but even just immediately, a little bit of tweaks to your itinerary planning and slower passages, you can actually achieve quite a lot. And I think that also goes to speaking to individuals doing your journey at the, your car journeys at the shared carpooling and doing it at the optimal speed to reduce your own emissions. So I think just speaking as an individual now, it's hard to try and change your whole life to make a reduction. But if you have a little bit less of everything you do, a few less kilometers, a little bit of carpooling, less of this, less of that, that's where you can actually achieve quite substantial reductions without completely changing your whole lifestyle. And I think that's a good place to start.
Yes. And here, of course, in Norway, electric cars have moved very quickly in the course of just a few years. This has really changed the whole picture. And that means you have to have places to charge batteries, etc. But we changed to electric car last year. And my son did that the year before, and it's much cheaper, partly because of taxation, but also the power is cheaper. So electric power is much cheaper than petrol.
Okay,
and so
right,
I can see in this country, at least, where we have a lot of hydroelectric power, this is clearly the way we are going. And more than half the cars sold now in Oslo area, where I live, are electric. More than half.
Okay, yeah, a lot to be done, but everyone's so aware now. It's no longer as though you need to talk about climate change as a theory. Everyone's so aware now. And that's certainly a big step in the right direction. Everyone's keen on getting on board with it. So that's certainly a step in the right direction. Now the technology is catching up. So I think it's an interesting time to be seeing through all this big change that's happening. Olav, thank you so much for your time.
I'm optimistic.
Yes.
But I just say I'm optimistic on the future because I see these changes. And I'm not among those that think we're going to go into a disaster. I think we will have some hardships in our children and grandchildren, but I'm quite sure we will get through this. Mankind will not collapse, I think, and we will come out better at the other end. I'm quite sure.
I agree. It's very easy to feel a bit overwhelmed at times and a bit of eco depression, especially in the last year where people have been at home a lot, thinking about things a lot more. It's easy to feel that eco depression, but actually there's so much going on if you go and look for it and you see these big movements and shifts, mindset shifts that are happening. I agree with you. I'm optimistic that everyone just ticking away at it all the time and we will get there. So yeah. Olav, thank you so much for your time again. I really, really appreciate it, and your knowledge and experience in this whole field from glaciers to climate change is very, very much appreciated.
Okay, I'm happy to be with you.
Cool. Thanks, Olav. Have a lovely afternoon. Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.